So if I've trained rats, I can train a hamster. I don't want to discuss what we did on Halloween, but you said something about peeing earlier. So we're going to go over to that house, and they got their Jack Russells. Before their Jack Russells drink all the eggnog.
Some say these two trainers were quietly in the shadows. Robert Weatherwax, last of the legendary Lassie Trainers, from the world's greatest movie dog training family, was quietly hidden in his TV work. And Christoph Clugston, elite action K9 trainer, was traveling from the sub-zero Arctic to the sweltering jungle heat, training dogs on 3 continents. But a chance meeting changed all of that. Now, Robert and Christoph have joined forces and they're breaking the silence. For the first time, the secretive and hidden world of the movie dog trainer and the science of the elite tactical trainer will be revealed. That's right, they are out of the shadows. Welcome to Tactical Practical.
Welcome back to the Tactical Practical Podcast. I'm Christoph Clugston, the Action K9 dog trainer, with Robert Weatherwax, former movie TV dog trainer, and now pet dog behaviorist. We're going to tackle today something that's pretty important and has a lot of ramifications, a lot of aspects, and we can't cover them all as usual, but we're going to raise awareness on something I think is very important, and that's tricks. How tricks can help the relationship you have with your dog, how tricks can help the foundational obedience that you need, and also how tricks can be something that you can aspire to and go further, because there is definitely a hierarchy of tricks. As a difficulty level, not every dog can do every trick. So with that being said, we're going to jump over to Robert, and he's going to tell us how he uses tricks to help the foundational obedience that he does with the pet dogs.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, like you mentioned, has to do with physical ability. If a dog has a natural talent for jumping, then maybe we can teach them some things that involve jumping. Maybe they have a natural ability to balance themselves. So maybe when I'm teaching them sit, I might turn that into a sit-up or a wave or begging or whatever it may be. I might use feet up, because I like to have dogs put their feet up on things. I can turn that into, say, a prayer, or just put your head down on something while standing. And of course, it depends on the position. In my training, in my private training practice, I execute tricks that go from the position where the dog is having the most difficulty. Like maybe a dog isn't very good at doing things or lying down. Maybe they're a little insecure and they don't like being so low in comparison to everyone around them. So what I'll do typically is I'll get them to do some things from that position that get them to not be thinking about the position so much, but what they can do from that position.
That it's a prerequisite for several tricks that they need to know certain positions first. For example, since we're going to go with that, let's take the crawl, for example. That is, again, that depends on the dog, because I have an American Bulldog, and he can crawl because my bond with the guy, but it's really difficult for him because of the way his biomechanically designed his body
chest, the big chest.
Yeah, and the back legs are big, so it's painful. It's actually painful for him to do it, but I don't make him do it for long, but he can do it. That has to do with our relationship. But before the crawl, we got to have the down, don't we, Robert? We got to get the down first, and it's also got to be they got to maintain the down, so when they're crawling, it makes the down stay better, because if the dog can definitely crawl forward, and we'll talk about the back crawl, which is an advanced the crawling backwards is an advanced skill, and the dog has got to know a few things before that. But as far as that, now something that you and I talk about, and it really puts us apart from the sport obedience guys, is as far as heeling or walking with us or loose leash, however you want to put it. We don't do that automatic sit that you see sport dog trainers and a lot of pet dog people doing. There's many reasons why we don't do that, but one of those reasons is because if the dog is standing, he can move, he can transition to other skills, and some of those tricks that are and also useful, and that you'll, and of course I gotta bring up Lassie for this, right?
Well,
that
oh.
the backing up, and you want to explain how you go through. I mean, I just saw a video of you the other day. You were working on with the funnel set up to help the dog back up, and that's you want to explain the.
Yeah, the backup is a great way to reposition a dog. So let's say that you set a dog on the set on a mark, and they step forward anticipating something that you may have done or somebody else did. So you can easily reposition a dog by teaching them a backup, which obviously can't happen if they're already in an auto sit. It can't happen if they're lying down. You can't do turn to the right, turn to the left, which is another trick that I do a lot of from a standing position. So these are all positions that are an extension of the standing stay, and that's why I use the mark. Because if I tell a dog to stand in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't have there's no point of reference at all. So I use the mark to give the dog a point of reference. Later on, the idea of stay is in their head. It's not on the ground anymore. They don't really need it unless they have to find a place. Then the mark is still useful, but it can become very small. It's kind of like a nudge. You start out with a dog nudging a big box, and then before you know it, they're nudging a jewelry box, right? You're working down. You're working out, and then you're working down, and you're refining the things that you're teaching, including the basics. And teaching tricks actually refines the basics, makes them stronger. It also makes the dog get more confidence because they know how to do things. They know how to please you, and that's important to a dog.
Well, and also it makes you better because I mean,
Right,
as a trainer, because you have to learn. Your timing has to become better when you're doing these, and some of the things you're talking about just reminds me because I just watched basically a reel of your dad doing the classic Lassie tricks with Lassie. I don't remember which Lassie that was, but he's doing the nudge, like you're saying. He's doing the backup. He's doing the paws up on something.
Howard, that was the collie. That was Lassie number 9.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so that's from the 95 version. Okay.
Yeah, Lassie, best friends are forever.
Yeah, yeah. That's the MTV. That I think they tried to make that. It's about the MTV generation or something. That was one of the things.
That actually started in the 80s, but it went into the 90s, right?
Yeah. But I'm saying that like the kid that's in it, right? He's supposed to be distracted, and then Lassie brings him back into reality of dealing with real life and not artificial.
Yeah, the kid who's trying to get away and not do his homework and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as the tricks go, those most of all the classic tricks. Now let's go backwards a minute. No pun there on the backup, but on the down. On the down, one of the classic things. I mean, as far as people started calling it, and the people that I knew, they started calling it the Lassie position. Although Rin Tin Tin did it first, and that is the on the side. Amazingly
digging.
tired. Yeah, amazingly
digging,
tired. Yeah, amazingly tired and struggling and being wounded. Because Rin Tin Tin got shot almost every movie. No, I don't think anybody ever added it up. But he was on his side, struggling. It wasn't just go to his side. He was struggling to try to get back up, and that's Lassie. Lassie, of course, Powell obviously did that incredibly well, and that I think that's why people started calling it the Lassie move. As far as that's what people would say.
Well, that's the scene that made Lassie. That scene.
Yeah, but I mean that shows complete control over the dog, doesn't it? I mean that's another thing with the trick, right? That's where you want to go with that because of that. That's really nuanced. Is what I'm getting to. I mean,
that's two tricks. That's two tricks. First of all, you're teaching the dog on your side, but they've already been taught to dig. So that's really a combination of on your side and dig. But it portrays a totally different emotion when combined together. So if you have tricks, you can link them together and put them into a sequence, and that can make the dog appear to be feeling something or trying to tell you something or trying to get away from something, whatever it may be. It portrays emotion. Movement portrays emotion, and tricks create movement.
Right, right. But where I want to also put this is that the level of trainer you got to be is where what I'm getting to. I mean, if you can get your dog to do these things, it means one that you've mastered the down stay, that you've mastered the getting the dog. Now, and I want to say this for everybody out there aspiring to do tricks or whatever. Dogs are just like us. Right-handed or left-handed, they're going to have one side that they like better than the other, and you might as well use that side. Don't try to fight it. I have two dogs who do that same thing we're talking about, going to the side and stuff, and this opposite sides. One dog likes the left side, the other one likes the right side. My point being, as a trainer, you got to know that you got to have the downstay, you got to get to the side, and then you got to have the digging, or you got to have. With my super dog, I got him doing the like he can barely lift his head up. You know what I'm saying? Like he's hurt, he's exhausted, he can't get his head back up, and it goes down, then it comes back up, and that is what you were talking about in an earlier podcast when you were talking about Carl Miller talking, or your dad or Rudd talking to the dog to get him to respond with emotion, like you're saying. And because you're telling the dog to do certain things, and the dog is responding, and this forms a really. I mean, you know your dog is what I'm getting to, right? You have to know your dog for this, and these sorts of things. And so, with that being said, do you always have a specific trick that you want to train with every dog that you're working with? Is there something that you always do?
Well, I mean, obviously, doing stay and heel and all that stuff is pretty boring. So a lot of times I'll teach them a trick to get them to do something that's fun, that makes the training worthwhile. So, doing basics, that's pretty boring. From there, we can start experimenting and see what the dog does well. I remember there was one dog that I was working with, and did really well on his basics, but he always showed this ability to, jump up in places. He was very agile. So I thought, why don't we just teach him to jump in the arm? So I started to, I got in a chair and I started to teach him to do it on my lap. And the funny thing is within 10 minutes, the dog was jumping in my arms because he had an ability that I recognized. And a lot of people don't even know their dogs well enough to know what they could be good at, right?
Right.
And that's what we have to look for. My dog looks like he could be a good crawler, or he could be a good jumper, or he could be a good retriever. Take advantage of the things they do naturally and turn them into tricks.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that if you talk to dog trainers who know what they're doing, they're always looking for dogs who have a natural flair or ability or even skill to do certain tricks. But you also have to be able to read the dog and say, "Hey, I think I can get this. I can do this trick with the dog." For example, my super dog, any sort of movement thing, that guy, he can pick it up, like the rebound, showing the rebound is when they jump up at something and bounce off, right? So I have him. That is easy for him. Incredibly easy. Now, other dogs, I mean, you're going to be spending a month. I mean, there's a process to all that. I mean, I didn't just point to it and he does it. But what I'm saying was like the same thing you're saying. It's like in 10 minutes. You know what I mean? I had him rebounding in like 10 minutes. And so that's really being able to read your dog. But then if you want to do, and there's a hierarchy to tricks. So some of the ones that are easy, and I think that are they tactical? Are they practical? Yeah, because it can help the dog's movement, being aware of his body, and also if you want to move the dog around in tight quarters in your house or your apartment, or even in a RV or something. And one of those is getting the dog to spin to the right or to the left. Those are some of the early things that I always work with, and that can work even for people who are doing sport obedience stuff. It helps with the heeling practice, the recalls and all that stuff, and getting the dog to move in tight spaces, the right and left. And that also, for me, I use it because I don't put it on verbal. I just do that with arm hand signals, and that gets the dog to start paying attention to me and to my hands. And that's one of the things that you want with your dog. You want your dog to focus on you when he should be doing something, or when he's going to be getting another signal. So those are some of the things that I do right away. Besides, we talked about a little bit before about getting on top of things. I use pedestals, perches, platforms, all these things. They help a dog because it's one of the things I will give away here. One of the things that Robert and I are both doing that is really different than the normal dog trainer is that we work not on position so much, but on location. And that's what a mark is. A mark is a location. We can move it around. It's not like, okay, as we talked about before a little bit about the remain or the stay, it's that we don't care if the dog sits or lies down. We just want the dog to remain in that location. And if they have a physical marker, which is what a marker is, it's much easier for the dog. So and from a tactical and practical point of view, we don't care as long as the dog stays in that place that you you told the dog to go to. We don't care if he sits or if he downs or he stands. That doesn't matter to us. And Robert, you want to point out some of the things again about why it's advantageous to have a stand because of the line of sight and such for the dog?
Yeah, well, I think for me, because I am a behaviorist as well as a dog trainer nowadays, I find that giving a dog a little bit of height, altitude can give them a feeling of confidence. It gives them a better view, like you said, give them a better eye line. I always make sure, too, when I use hand signals, if I'm working with a dachshund, I'm not going to have my hand way up in the air, right? I'm going to have it down low by the ground, right?
Yeah.
Because I want the dog to actually see the hand, so they can get away from voice. Now, obviously, we use voice when you talk about my grandfather and the video, the audio video that you heard with Carl Miller. There's a lot of voice used in getting emotion out of the dog, but we're not actually getting our dog to act in a movie. All we want them to do is act in real life, right? Right. To be a dog that you can depend on. The dog, I say in my book that the dog that you don't have to think of is the best dog there is, right? Because you don't have to worry if he's tearing up the furniture in the other room. You don't have to worry about whether he's peeing on your clothes, whatever. And another thing, too, I talk about is go dogs and stay dogs. Now, this is very important because go dogs will struggle more with a standing stay because they want to go, right? They don't really want to sit. They don't really want to lie down. So standing stay is probably your best starting point for an action trick. So you don't want to start from a down or start from a sit. I know that with the police department and stuff like that, they will purposely have them sit and at attention. But there's a reason for that. There's no reason for you to do that in your house, right? You really just want to have a dog that you don't have to worry about, that you can just give them a hand signal and they know what to do because they've done it enough to know. And that dog is going to get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So you have to keep introducing them to new things. I'm like, let me see. What did I not teach my dog yet? Oh, yeah, I never taught him to retrieve. I'm going to teach him to retrieve. That's like a thing. And we just teach it. You don't know if you're ever going to use it, but that's tactical and that's practical because if you need something, a retrieve is going to help you whether you're disabled or not, right?
Yeah, right. Car keys, and we can go to that. That's one of the
cell phones, remote controls, all that stuff. I've done it. I had a little Jack Russell that I taught to carry a woman's cane, and the cane was 3 times as big as the dog. So it can be done. You can teach dogs to do anything, even dogs that don't look physically capable of doing it.
Yeah,
in many cases.
Right. Well, when you're going that direction with talking about, just to clarify to people, since I've done lots of different types of dog training, you can see a video on my channel where I'm showing real control over a protection dog, and one of the things is that dog, I'm away from the dog. There's an agitator with a bite sleeve on. He's off he's away from the dog, and I'm away from the dog. The dog's in a downstay to show that the dog can listen to that. Then I recall the dog to me, and then I send the dog to go to the bite. That is a level of control that you want with the protection dog, number one. But that's exactly what Robert was just
Right.
talking about. And the downstay is not what the dog wants to do, because the dog's genetics want to engage with the guy with the bite sleeve on. But we say this because that's not so much of a trick, but it feeds into exactly what Robert's talking about with the control of the dog, and you don't have to worry about the dog. If I can get the dog to do this, then I don't have to worry about the dog in certain situations. He's not gonna exactly just take off on anything. That's one of the things that Robert was talking. I really want to emphasize that most people, the stand stay is really difficult for most people to teach. Really, you can even go to obedience classes or pet dog trainers. They will not teach it because it's difficult. I mean, it really is more difficult. And one of the secrets to that is the mark. And that's something, if you're not using a mark, it becomes pretty difficult to teach a stand, because now you're teaching it as a position and not as a location. And again, we're teaching from location, not so much as a position. The other people are teaching, okay, the position of sit, the position of down, position of stand. But to a dog, that doesn't make as much sense as a location makes. And so if Robert has said before when we've been talking, like, he doesn't even like to get into this automatic sit. I don't either. I think it's ridiculous. And I said it before. I'm going to say it again. Blanche Saunders is the person who created the AKC obedience whole thing, and she regretted later starting to have this automatic sit, because she realized that it's not practical for most dogs. It doesn't look right, number one, and it's just, again, as Robert's saying, it's a way to try. He said it's a way to try to control the dog, as opposed to having the dog learn self-control.
A purpose.
Yeah, right. And
Right.
so let's talk about how the tricks can change the dog's personality, as far as the confidence level.
Well, yeah, it gives them the confidence that, first of all, it broadens their intelligence, because they say even with humans there's only so much of our brain we actually use. And obviously, if you're sitting around doing nothing with your brain, it's not going to grow. There's not going to be any development of those unused portions of your brain, right? So really, what we're doing is we're getting the dog to explore their own abilities. Because I remember Dr. Laura said something very insightful. She said that self-esteem isn't somebody telling you you're doing a good job. Self-esteem is when you can do a good job and be rewarded for it. So that's self-esteem is not given, it's earned. And a dog doing things that truly amaze even themselves, that's self-esteem. That's the definition of self-esteem.
Right. Yeah, and I want to touch on this just because it's something I alluded to earlier, and I want to just make sure, because people sometimes will say, "Hey, you didn't follow up on this." I just want to follow up on this a little bit, and but it goes right into what Robert's saying. Okay, my American Bulldog is autistic, and it's exactly what autism means. He can't handle new situations of new people, new locations, or new dogs that he doesn't know. It freaks him out, and he's been with me. I'm his human support animal, basically emotional human. But I got him to do. I trained him to limp, and you won't see anybody else with 110 pounds. I even contacted some trick trainers and said, "You guys have any dogs that equal this guy's size?" And they got flippant with me and said, "What if I can train my horse to do it?" I was like, "Well, you don't have a dog that can do it." So anyway, the point being, though, I have a 110-pound autistic American Bulldog. It's very hard for him, body size and weight. He has to be very strong to be able to limp. He's doing it, but that has given him confidence like you would not believe, because the guy bounces around, is happy. He he wants to do it for me. I mean, he just does it on his own, Robert. You know, I mean, you've seen this, right? Once you teach some dogs tricks and it gets confidence, and you go in and that dog is poof, right? He's doing.
Right.
How's the jumping up in the arms thing going anyway? Is that dog like constantly wanting to jump in your arms? Now.
Yeah, absolutely. And his owner does it all the time. Every time somebody comes to the house, it's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Bam, dog jumps in his arms.
Yeah,
That's a great party show trick.
Yeah, and what I'm getting to that dynamic between you and the dog though gets better. It's my point about talking about my bulldog is that it's helped our
Right.
relationship.
You're building a bond.
And the dog trusts me. I mean, the only reason that this dog will crawl and stuff because the dog trusts me. Because it's not comfortable for him to do it. And this is what I'm getting to. One of the benefits of doing tricks is not just to do tricks for no other reason, but it's to facilitate the bond with the dog, become a better dog trainer. And also, but like Robert was saying, you got to have something else for the dog to do. And so where do you go when the dog can do a sit and a down and he'll more or less always come back to you because the recall, you always got to work on the recall. But where do you go from there? And there's all these different tricks. I mean, Robert, name off a bunch of tricks that for people. You know what I'm saying? Give them some ideas of some tricks that, you know what I mean? Some that they might be able to do, some that they can aspire to.
Right. Well, there's a lot of tricks you can teach. I mean, there's what I call the voluntary tricks and the involuntary tricks. Like, we used to teach a lot of tricks in the film industry, like sneeze and yawn and scratch, and things that dogs do naturally, don't really think about it, right?
Right.
So a lot of times we can induce a behavior, but we can't induce a behavior if the dog's all over the place and he won't stay in one place for you, which is what a mark is going to develop. You're already going to know that where your dog's going to be, so that when you place that little piece of tissue paper in their nose to induce the sneeze, they're not going to run away from you, right? And it's just going to make all the other tricks that much easier because your dog is going to be more calm. He's not going to be hand shy because he's seen your hand coming in and out, all this stuff, teaching all these things. And now it's just like, your hand, you're going to make me do this now, okay. But it's like, they want to learn more. They're like, is that all there is? There's got to be more than this. So and then a lot of times too, I work with puppies. And puppies don't have a lot of stamina sometimes. So when they're starting to fall asleep, I'll get them to do something action-packed. I'll either make them come, or I'll make them jump or put their feet up, or do something fun. And then suddenly, they're ready to go again. Because they did something they wanted to do, not something I wanted them to do.
Right. It's if the best scenario is if you can make the dog think that he came up with the idea.
Exactly.
Is the thing, and so that's like jumping through a hoop. That's something that if you do it correctly, it's easy, and the dog wants to do it. But if you try to turn it into some sort of mechanical force,
well, the praise has to be meaningful. I mean, the praise in the beginning, the praise that you apply the first time they do it, that's what really sets the tone, because now you're going to start raising the height of the jump or raising the distance of the jump, and that all comes from them, riding the bicycle with training wheels and then taking them off. And taking off the training wheels is what we're doing when we're going beyond the foundation training. We're taking off the training wheels and we're getting them to really see what they can do with their bicycle.
Right. And the thing is, but something that I want to make crystal clear to everybody is the fact that if we're going on to these, if we're moving on to tricks, that the basics are solid, and that's really the first goal is to get the basics really solid. But a lot of people struggle. I mean, they really struggle with the basics. But if you can get the basics, you get them at 75%, and you start doing tricks, suddenly those basics go to 90, 95. 98, 99, then to a place where you don't even worry about it because the dog can do it with. It accelerates the learning, is what I think. What do you think about that aspect?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. Just like they used to say, reading is fundamental. So, people who do a lot of reading, they know a lot of stuff, right? Now, to me, doing tricks is like doing the reading. It's doing the homework. It's expanding your horizons because you don't care about where Brazil is until you know where Bolivia is, right? So it's really just a chain. It's a link to the next thing. Like there is no brick walls to what a dog can learn. We don't put brick walls in front of our dogs. We put horizons in front of our dogs so that they can see what is possible, right? Like I could jump over that thing too. I could jump over that chair, I could jump over that table, and all you did was get them to jump over your leg or something, or jump through a hoop, and now they want to jump through everything. And that's good for a dog because it's going to make them a better companion. It's going to make them more intuitive because now they're figuring out things on their own based on knowledge that you gave them, right?
Right. Well, let me give you a personal story here about how all this fits together, like where Robert's just saying. And this is a true personal story. I started training dogs when I was 14 years old, and I was very inspired by Carl Miller's work. At the time, I didn't know it was Carl Miller. That was a couple of years later I found out what it was, and it was I was watching Run Joe Run, and so I'd see new things on Run Joe Run, and I had a German short-haired pointer who was a great dog, and so I would teach him some of these things. And one of the things that I taught him was climbing a ladder, and so I started out with the normal the normal step ladder thing, I guess, right? I started out with that. Okay, well, I had trained him to do this, among other things I trained him to do from watching. And I just, gave me the idea, okay, how can I train that? And it wasn't that, it's difficult. Going down is insanely hard for a dog, but going up is not, depending. Anyway, so my dad happened to be working on the roof of our house, and he put a ladder, of course, upside, so he's about 16, 17 feet up to get onto the roof with the ladder, and he's up there, he's putting new shingles or roofing or whatever you call that stuff on there, and then he turns around and he said, "What the hell is this?" My dog's name was Brutus. "What the hell are you doing up here?" My dog had climbed the ladder up and was on the roof now, and so the dog was showing exactly what you're saying. It's like, oh, now I know how to climb ladders. I'm going to go up this ladder. Getting the dog off the roof was a lot more difficult than the dog getting on the roof, I'll say that. But this is exactly what you're talking about. The dogs now, it's like, hey, what can I do with this newfound ability that I have? And in my case,
Right.
this is one of the things that I did. I think I told that to Carl when I talked to him. I was like, he was asking me questions about what I'd done, but that's exactly what you're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. And ladder climbing is a good skill. Now I would there's hierarchies. I want to cover this real quickly of what are difficult. Okay, so the giving a paw, or however you want to put it, to shake. That's not difficult. The going to the side depends on the dog. The crawling can be difficult with certain dogs. The backwards crawl is difficult. I would put that in expert category. And the backup is medium level, depends on the dog. Again, the limp is expert level. And some of the other things, like you'll see some wild stuff you can only do with certain dogs, like Malinois, or dogs like a Malinois, or poodles, circus poodles, and that's like doing the walking on their front paws. You know what I'm saying? Walking on their front two legs. Walking on the hind
Right.
two legs is difficult too. But the front ones, that's like
Walking on the hind legs is pretty easy for small dogs, but not
Yeah,
so much
right.
for big dogs.
Right, yeah. Because please, people, don't try to do one of the things that trainers will say that know what they're doing. Don't try to make a big dog do small dog tricks. I mean, Don't do that. And it's one of the things. Is like I think Robert. I think you feel the same way. Like I do not teach bigger dogs to do the rollover anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, I'll talk about
Right.
going to the side and then rolling over because they can mess their spine up. That's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I
don't-
typically stop it on your side. I typically stop it on your side if I'm working with a Great Pyrenees or a Saint Bernard or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't have my super dog. He can do it. I taught him, but I don't do it anymore because I don't want him because he's fast. I mean, he does his motions fast. I don't want him messing up his back because he's got a long back. So
Right.
that's one of those things like the Jack Russell or one of the miniature poodles. Okay, no problem. No problem for that, the rolling over, spinning sort of thing. But don't do that with the bigger dog. So I want to throw that out there for people. It's like don't try to make a big dog do small dog tricks.
Don't make a jockey become a basketball player. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
See,
Or vice
'cause-
versa. Right.
Right. Because I care about the health of the dog. So I'm being serious here for a moment. But yeah, as far as there's a definite hierarchy, so you can aim for these different levels of tricks and get your skill level better because you got to be better. And there's more than one way to train something. That's something that a lot of people had problems like. How did you teach a bulldog how to limp? Because their methods aren't working, wouldn't work with them. And I used exactly what Lee Duncan. I ended up doing the same thing Lee Duncan did with Rin Tin Tin for him to learn. So if you don't know that, well, you can hit us up at workshops and clinics and stuff where we can cover that because you can't learn from us describing it, number one. And number two, they'd be kind of not being really smart trying to give out information like that where people could get their dogs.
Besides, it's very advanced, and unless you have a strong foundation, you have no need to even know about tricks like that.
Yeah,
Because there's
yeah.
a huge foundation they'll need before. There really isn't any need to teach a dog to sit and then go skip over all these other easier tricks and teach them
Right,
something
right.
like limp. They don't need
Yep.
to know that. They need to know other things first. Things that are
Right,
more
right.
functional. Yeah.
Right. But as far as I'm just talking about the hierarchy of what's hard. Limping is definitely hard.
Well, you want to know a little secret, little Lassie secret? Do you know how Lassie got up on the stump and had the paw across his chest? That all started out when Lassie got something in his foot, and
Yeah,
he was lifting his foot up for sympathy.
Yeah.
For sympathy.
Yeah.
Oh, my foot, it hurts, and he'd bring it over the side.
Yeah.
So Rudd would bridge that. He'd bridge that behavior, and he'd put a cue on it, and he'd reward the dog. The dog
Yep.
thought of it himself. All he did was get the dog to recognize what he was doing and
Yeah.
turn it into something useful.
Yeah, we call
Yeah?
that in behavior operant. We call that capturing, and that's the best thing to do. So
Well, in my book, I call it inducement. Where you're tricking the dog into believing that that's
Yeah.
the best way to go. Right?
Yeah. Well, my other mentor, he would do exactly what you're saying. He would put something in the foot pad, right? I mean, that was one of he'd gimmick it. I mean,
Well, this was
yeah.
Yeah, you can gimmick a snarl, but you can teach a snarl organically, or you can
Yeah.
use a device.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But let me get to it. And I feel that it's great gimmicking, and for movies, you can pull it off. But really, as a trainer, I think that's your dad said that too, right? Your dad was more about the.
Yeah, my dad said the dog that gets the training gets the job, not
Right.
the other way around. The dog that gets the job gets the training, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know. Whatever. I agree with that thinking, though. I mean, that's what I try to do. But anyway, so Robert, I think we did a good session here about. We didn't cover everything because we can't, as usual. But we've given people a new idea about tricks that don't see them separate from the other things that you're doing. See them as an extension of what you're doing, and an advancement. And I really see it as a way to get a better bond, a better relationship with your dog. That to me is the most important thing.
Can I make a quick point?
Yeah.
I just want to make a quick point. For anybody who hasn't seen my book out there on Amazon, Training Your Dog the Weatherwax Way, keep in mind that I have an entire chapter dedicated to just tricks that you can teach your dog.
Yeah.
And I believe that's why my book has a little something for everybody, because it tells you a little bit about healthcare with your dog. It tells you a little bit about puppy diseases and things that, general knowledge type things. But then it just dedicates one chapter to just showing off your dog, because that's what it's all about to me, being able to show your dog off at parties and Christmas Eve and whatever. And people are like, oh, let's go over to their house. They got those cool trained dogs, let's go over there, and they got better pie.
Better pie. I think I think you should have said eggnog. I think that would if you're gonna go for the
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It could be pie, eggnog. We don't care.
Oh, we're gonna go over to that house, and they got their Jack Russells. Before their Jack Russells, drink all the eggnog. You know what I mean?
Didn't you do that on Halloween? Didn't you do that on Halloween, where you go to the houses where they gave out Three Musketeers because you like Three Musketeers?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yeah. We just, well, I don't want to discuss what we did on Halloween, but some of the things. That's my favorite. That is one of my favorite. I tell you, living in Hollywood, that was always great. Halloween was great in Hollywood. I gotta say that. Hollyweird. That's it.
Halloween. We would call that Halloween. Yeah.
Yeah. And but we're getting into other stories we can talk about if you And remember, people too. We talk about Lassie sometimes, but we're not going to do big time Lassie stories until we get more subscribers. So please subscribe. And I just got to say this here: comments answer from subscribers nowadays, because hey, we're giving out some cool information here, and you're not going to get it anywhere else, because we are breaking the silence. We are telling you about a whole different way of thinking about training dogs, and obviously it works. As you can see you can see Robert's work. Beethoven, I know you were talking about that movie earlier this week. That's Robert was involved with that. And then also we just talked about that 1994 Lassie. You were involved in that, right? You did. What dog was that? What dog was that? Howard? Was that?
That was Howard. That was Howard. But I had another dog there named Rox, and we had a dog named Flash. We also had a dog that was Howard's father, who actually played a doubled for Howard in the movie. So he went from being lead Lassie to double Lassie, which is the opposite of how it normally works. But Howard looked so much different than his dad. He was so much bigger that it was really hard to we used his father for more of the difficult tricks, because Howard was fairly inexperienced when he did that movie in '95.
Yeah.
So he's well trained, but not very experienced.
Well, my point being is, you can see that we're not talking about stuff we can't do. There, take a look at that. I just mentioned a couple movies. There's more. Robert's done more movies than that, more TV too.
Yeah, I have an IMDb page, and it's under the name that's on the podcast, R. Riddell Weatherwax. It'll come up with all my film. That's where my name. That's my name for Screen Actors Guild and for as an author. Yeah.
So I mean, saying that, and then of course I got stuff on YouTube, and I'm not done putting stuff up on YouTube, so you can see some of the things that I can do with dogs.
Absolutely.
And this is the point. But down the road, we're looking forward to when our subscription base gets larger and people want to know these things, because the movie tactical training is not something anybody else is doing. They're not talking about this, and we can really talk about how in person, and those people who want to learn this method, because there's a lot to it. Look forward to having seminars and clinics and workshops for that. So that's where we can go in the future. But anyway, as far as all that goes, so what you've got takeaways from this: eggnog, Jack Russells,
Yeah.
You said you said something about peeing earlier, so that'll probably be in the front of the video.
Well, there's a trick. You can teach your dog to pee on cue. Lift their leg. That's a
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not easy though. For a lot of dogs,
No,
that's not easy at all.
no, it's really kind of like your limp, but it's a rear leg limp almost.
Yeah,
Because you have to get them up next to something, and then you have to prompt that leg, whatever leg they favor, on that spot. But it's not that hard. Normally I use a pointer for that. I'll use something where I can touch the dog and bring the leg up a little bit from a distance.
Yeah.
Little trick, inside trick. Yeah.
Yeah. See.
I know.
See, people, you just got an insider. You just got an.
Got to hang around is what you have to do. You have to hang around. You have to keep coming. If you don't keep coming, you're not going to learn all this stuff.
Right. And that's the thing. And it's like, and that's the thing. We're not even scratching the surface, to use the cliche of everything. But tell your dog, tell your hamsters. I have trained rats. So if I've trained rats, I can train a hamster. Everybody with hamsters is going to send me a message. I want my hamster trained. So
we're going to have our next episode be Rat 101.
Yeah. That's the. Oh, and you work just as a sideline about that, because that '95 movie. You work with wolves too, right?
Yeah. With Clint Rao. Yeah. Clint Rao supplied the wolves for the Lassie movie.
Yeah. Is that Carol? Was she in?
No, Carol worked. Yeah, Carol was my dad's first assistant on Lassie. I actually was working on Top Dog when they did that movie, but I went to I did second unit for the movie. I didn't actually work on the principal photography. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Carol did the principal photography.
Well, who else was working the wolves? Because not just one guy. I mean,
it was Clint, and he had an assistant, and I forget what his name was, but he was a guy that I'd never worked with before. But Clint has been working with my dad for a long time. They did Down Out in Beverly Hills. They did The Thing. So my dad and Clint worked together.
That's it, people. He just gave out the big thing there. That's it. That's enough for this episode. Christmas party, Robert's coming over. So be ready, people. Just let you know. Okay.